Good morning. Today we're going to be reading from the Brothers Grimm. You've heard of Grimm's fairy tales. This is an obscure story I've never read. It's called The Seven Ravens. Let's see, the Brothers Grimm, 101 fairy tales. So this is a reprinting of Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. English pronunciation is Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Their stories were published between 1785 and 1863. And they wrote several stories to help children and people learn about grim and potentially hazardous situations in life. So I've never heard of this story before. I chose it because it was short, because I don't want to take up too much of anyone's time, especially. So let's begin. It's 2 pages, no pictures, so you have to use your imagination. The Seven Ravens. There once was a man who had 7 sons, and still he had no daughter. However, much he wished for one. At length his wife again gave him hope of a child, and when it came into the world, it was a girl. The joy was great, but the child was sickly and small. Oh, my nose itches. And had to be privately baptized on account of its weakness. Wow. The father sent one of the boys in haste to the spring to fetch water for the baptism. The other 6 went with him, and as each of them wanted to be first to fill it, the jug fell into the well. There they stood, and did not know what to do, and none of them dared go home. As they still did not return, the father grew impatient and said, "They have certainly forgotten it for some game, those wicked boys." He became afraid that the girl would have to die without being baptized, and in his anger cried, "I wish the boys were all turned into ravens." Hardly was the word spoken before he heard a whirring of wings over his head in the air, looked up, and saw 7 coal-black ravens flying away. The parents could not recall the curse, and however sad they were at the loss of their 7 sons, they still, to some extent, comforted themselves with their dear little daughter, who soon grew strong and every day became more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had brothers, for her parents were careful not to mention them before her. But one day she accidentally heard some people saying of herself that the girl was certainly beautiful, but that in reality she was to blame for the misfortune which had befallen her 7 brothers. Wow. Then she was much troubled, and went to her father and mother and asked if it was true that she had had brothers, and what had become of them. The parents now dared keep the secret no longer, but said that what had befallen her brothers was the will of heaven, and that her birth was not to blame. But the maiden took it to heart daily, and thought she must save her brothers. She had no rest or peace until she set out secretly and went forth into the wide world to find her brothers and set them free. Let it cost what it might, she took nothing with her but a little ring belonging to her parents as a keepsake, a loaf of bread against hunger, a little pitcher of water against thirst, and a little chair as a provision against weariness. And now she went continually onwards, far, far to the very end of the world. Then she came to the sun, but it was too hot and terrible, and devoured little children. Hastily she ran away and ran to the moon, but it was far too cold, and also awful and malicious. And when it saw the child, it said, I smell the flesh of men. At this she ran swiftly away and came to the stars, which were kind and good to her, and each of them sat on its own particular little chair. But the morning star arose and gave her the drumstick of a chicken and said, If you have not that drumstick, you cannot open the glass mountain. And in the glass mountain are your brothers. Well, that's interesting. I want to read that again. If you have not that drumstick, you cannot open the glass mountain. And in the glass mountain are your brothers. So the stars gave her the drumstick so that she could open the glass mountain. That's my commentary. The maiden took the drumstick, wrapped it carefully in a cloth, and went onward again until she came to the glass mountain. The door was shut, and she thought she would take out the drumstick, but when she undid the cloth, it was empty, and she had lost the good star's present. What was she to do now? She wished to rescue her brothers, and had no key to the glass mountain. The good sister took a knife, cut off one of her little fingers. Oh my gosh. Put it in the door and succeeded in opening it. When she had gone inside, a little dwarf came to meet her, who said, My child, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers, the 7 ravens, she replied. The dwarf said, The Lord Ravens are not at home, but if you will wait here until they come, step in. Thereupon the little dwarf carried the ravens' dinner in on 7 little plates and in 7 little glasses, and the little sister ate a morsel from each plate, and from each little glass she took a sip. But in the last glass she dropped the ring which she had brought away with her. Suddenly she heard a whirring of wings and a rushing through the air. And then the little dwarf said, Now the Lord Ravens are flying home. Then they came and wanted to eat and drink, and looked for their little plates and glasses. Then said one after the other, Who has eaten something from my plate? Who has drunk out of my little glass? It was a human mouth. And when the 7th came to the bottom of the glass, the ring rolled against his mouth. Then he looked at it and saw that it was a ring belonging to his father and mother, and said, God grant that our sister may be here, and then we shall be free. When the maiden, who was standing behind the door watching, heard that wish, she came forth, and at this all the ravens were restored to their human form again, and they embraced and kissed each other and went joyfully home. That's the end. Well, what do you think of that story? Grimm's stories usually have a moral, meaning there's a lesson to be learned in the story. And I think it's that the sister sacrificed of herself to save her brothers. What do you think?